Hi everyone, welcome back. Today is a very special day and episode because I finally got over my fear and I did an interview. And this interview with Faith Diver is magic because so many magical synchronicities brought us together to have this interview. And what I found is that throughout the process, what I was looking for in the person that I am here to interview is the nectar of that person. I spent some time getting to know Faith, but I knew very early on she would be the first person that I interview. And then from there we spent time getting to know each other. And not only were there so many synchronicities that brought this together, but it also helped her and me achieve a huge leap in faith. Her for using her voice, me for allowing another energy on this arena or this platform, and me being able to accept and receive another person. And it's a very magical episode. You're going to learn a lot about Faith, how she was raised, how that helped her find her leap, actually, and how she had to completely leave her soul to come back around full circle to find it again and appreciate all of the nuggets of love that happen in her conditioning. So I also am excited because she shares some tools that have been very helpful for her, and we just have a good conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and I do look forward to doing these again, of course, when I get the knowing that the next person comes in. And I just want to thank you all for holding space for Faith, and I know you're going to enjoy her, so enjoy. Okay, everyone, I want to introduce you to Faith, and her last name is like Diver, but it's Diver, but she is literally a Faith diver. And for me, there are so many synchronicities that made it very clear that if I was going to do this and if I was ready to interview people, Faith was I feel like my North Star to get there. And this has been kind of a few months in the making, so it's not like we just decided to do this. So I want to just give the backstory of how Faith came into this, obviously, I'm so grateful position. So we met first on August 12th, and it was through a human design reading I did with her. And that reading felt like every other reading that I have done. I connected, but I also kept somewhat of a I guess, a teacher's perspective. I don't know how to say it. And then it was a great conversation, but we didn't speak again. And then on March 3rd, she booked another appointment, and she lives on the East Coast. So for her time, it was 3 p.m. on March 3rd. And for me that morning, this time though, it was the Ascension blueprint reading. And I get in my car in the morning to take my dogs for a walk, and the mileage on my car said 104444. And I never look at my mileage. I mean, why would you when it gets to that point? I don't know. But that was the one thing that stood out to me when I sat down, and I took a picture of it, and I knew today something's happening. I like, everything in me was like, I need to pay attention today, no matter so whether it be with the dogs walking or whatever is happening, something's happening today. So I was already aware it was a big day for me. And then we get to her reading, and it was going as planned. Like, I was moving through it. And then she said, can I say something? And I was like, of course, like, talk to me, share with me. And it was at that point for me that everything changed, because I started to be able to feel into you. And in that, it made me see that we have so much in common and have had very similar paths, and also extremely different paths. But yet we are at this point right now that we're just aligned. Like, I'm working on a class right now about the aura, and when you get to the etheric template, which is from the third eye, you start to notice that your field gets very clear, and you get these synchronicities and these movements that people are just put into your life for a reason, and you know it. There's no longer this like, oh, that was an interesting conversation. It's like everything in my body that day just like took notice of you and was like, who's this force? So I would love for you to give me your perspective on that particular day.
Yes, absolutely. So, well, going back to actually our first reading in March, that
in August.
Sorry, in August. Yes, August had been, let's see, about 6 months that I was into a very interesting journey in my life. But by then, your podcast, Gabrielle, had been a huge part of that season of my life, my own leap of faith. And it was probably at least 6 months at that point, before we even had our first reading, that I had been tuning into your episodes. And so you were on this journey already with me, and you had no idea. And I knew so much about you, and you had no idea who I was. But I was following your journey, and you were holding my hand on my journey. Little did you know that. But I would listen to you in the car, usually when I would be driving. So it would just be, me in the car and your voice with me traveling wherever I was going. And, in my life for the last 20 years, I've listened to a lot of different podcasts. I know like many of us do. But your podcast was just so different because it felt like a friend, and it felt like being so seen and being so supported. And it was because of your vulnerability. You were sharing with us exactly what you're going through, and there was no holding back. And that was allowing me to go deeper into my own process just by watching you and hearing from you as you did that in your own life. It was the most empowering thing that I could have ever asked for. And it felt like such a gift to find that in the world. Truly, when I first came across it, and I actually don't remember how I found the podcast. How I tend to look into podcasts is by searching something that I'm looking to learn about. So whether it's crystals or meditation or Pleiades or whatever it is, whatever topic I'm looking to find out about, I'll usually plug that into the podcast app and see what comes up. So whatever it was at that time, your podcast came up, and I just remember seeing the name, My Leap of Faith. And I said, well, I mean, you can't get more of a sign from the universe than that. Because my name is Faith, and I was at that time in my own leap. So it truly felt like something that was so custom designed for me. And that's how it felt for a good 6 months. It felt like every episode that I listened to was you, Gabrielle, talking to me. And on so many levels. I mean, my nephew's name is Gabriel. And so the word Gabriel is a huge, that carries so much energy in the sphere of my life. It is my only nephew. It is, the only grandchild in the family. He's the only child of my sister, who is my only sister. And both of them are so dear to my heart. It just doesn't get closer than that. And, to hear your story, how you were born Gabriel and changed your name, and just the whole story. But truly, it was one thing after another. There was really not a single episode I listened to where something didn't come through that felt like it just went straight into my heart. Like I was being so seen and supported. And at that time, I was in this womb, this incubator of, I had stepped away from everything in my life. I was alone. I was like home by myself all day, every day on purpose. However, it would be very easy to feel like I was in that alone. And it was, yeah, your podcast, I mean, almost like single-handedly got me through some of those moments where you do start to ask yourself, am I going crazy? I mean, the bigger the leap that you take, the more you realize, like I knew nothing. It's like being born again.
Well, like for you, I know that it was kind of more of a rebirth because you were born into a very spiritual family and also had a lot of gifts in your own right. Do you want to speak about that?
Yes. All right. So I'll start from the beginning.
Okay.
Even though time isn't linear and all of these things are more cyclical, but we'll go back to the beginning, and I'll start by introducing my parents because they are the human vessels that I chose to come through. And their story is a big part of my story, and our journeys kind of echo each other. So my parents, in their early 20s, before they met each other, they each had spontaneous awakenings. So my dad had grown up Irish Catholic. My mom had been Southern Baptist. They had attended church growing up, but weren't very religious or very spiritual. It was more of a cultural thing for both of them, or a way to be with family. My dad had just finished college and was starting a career in the military. He was in the Army, and my mom was finishing up art school. And one day, out of the blue, they were, each on their own. They had that awakening moment. And the way they describe it is they encountered God. They met God in that room, just alone. And that moment changed the rest of their life. And from then on, nothing was the same. They completely changed the trajectory of their life. And out of that expansion of consciousness that they were embarking on, they looked for a community. Because they didn't know anyone else in their life that had had this type of experience. So the community that was kind of in their sphere at that time and in that space and location was the born again movement. So this was kind of a new version of Christianity where there was prophecy and speaking in tongues, otherwise known as angelic language or light language. There was healing, laying on of hands and people being miraculously healed. And I mean, all kinds of truly amazing things that you can't deny. And so they felt like they found their people and their calling, and they felt supported in the mission that they felt they were here to embody out of that awakening experience that they had had. So they were part of this same church, but they had only met each other in passing as acquaintances. And one night my mom had a dream about my dad, that he was holding her hand and leading her through a minefield. And because he was with her and protecting her, they made it across the field safely. And she woke up and she knew in her heart that would be her life partner. Little did she know that my dad, right around the same time, he was on the military base. He was walking to his car in the parking lot, and he had a download, as can happen. It's always when you least expect it. He had a download that my mom, this woman that he knew as an acquaintance, was meant to be his life partner, that this was his twin flame. So my dad told his friend this experience, and my mom told her friend this experience. These two friends that they told happened to be married to each other. So they were able to connect the dots and realize that these two people who didn't really know each other had a dream and a download about coming together.
Yeah.
So they brought them together, and in just a short span of time, they were engaged and got married. And off of a dream and a download, they have been married for 40 years and counting.
Wow.
And it is a truly extraordinary marriage and friendship and relationship, I have to say. So much so that it was always kind of daunting to hear about this story. Like, well, I can never live up to that. How am I going to find my own life partner? Because their story is so special. But that is the love that I was born into.
Yeah.
So shortly after they were married, they felt the call to move to Seoul, South Korea. And what was happening at that time in the 80s in South Korea was the country was coming out of communism, and there was a truly mass awakening happening in the country. Like the collective consciousness was expanding. There were many, miracles happening and people finding spirituality at a very rapid pace. So there was a lot of energy around that space at this time. And because people were having these awakening experiences and looking for communities, it seemed that there wasn't enough support, even logistically. Like the churches were just overflowing, and they didn't have enough people to be in ministry and to, help people make sense of these awakening experiences that they were having. So the church that my parents were a part of, they put the call out, does anyone feel led to move to South Korea and to help, and support what's happening there? And my parents felt very deeply that they were called to go. So they sold every possession that they had. They had a 1-year-old son, my older brother, and they picked up and left, and they thought that they would be there forever. But in their mind, there was no looking back. There was no thinking about, keeping one foot in and one foot out. They just leapt all the way. And by the way, this was before cell phones and was using the internet. Like they were just going to a very far off place that they'd never been to, and, leaving all their family and their friends behind. So after they were there for about a year, learning the language, wow. Yeah, I can only imagine like how brave they must have had to be at that time to do something like that. But they had been there about a year, and in their prayer meditation, I came through to them. So I started to come through and say, hey, I would like to be born. I'm a girl, and my name is Faith, and I choose you to be my parents.
I have goosebumps.
And they said yes, with open arms. Not that, having a baby or being pregnant in a foreign country, which was just coming out of being a third world country, not that that's something that they had ever really planned on, or not that it would be easy, but they were in it all the way. So I just commend them for receiving me with open arms. I mean, my mom tells me stories about how, she would be pregnant with me over those months in which she carried me. And, she had my brother in the stroller, and they would walk, to go get groceries or take the bus to wherever. And there would be tear gas everywhere because there were so many students protesting, the old regime that was crumbling at the time. And it was chaotic. I mean, there was a lot of unrest in the country, and I mean, my mom tells me stories about how she could barely find food in the grocery stores, like nutritious food to feed the little baby that was growing in her womb, because with the kind of unrest, the political unrest that the country was going through, the food systems just weren't there. I mean, we're so used to going to the grocery store and getting healthy food, and it was a struggle at the time. And so that is kind of the setting that I came into. I was born in a military hospital on a military base there in Seoul. The doctor did not speak English, and my mom's Korean was, pretty rudimentary at that time. And so imagine like giving birth and not being able to even communicate with your doctor. But she said she never felt closer to God in that moment, because it was just a total surrender of okay, you brought us this far.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not going to let us down. And yeah, I mean, I can tell you my experience on the other side, like while my mom was in labor, I had been, feeling like I was definitely hovering around her. I was with her, but I wasn't yet in my physical,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't yet in the vessel. And yeah, there was a few moments before I was born, although it's hard to quantify it in time because it is a space of timelessness. But it was right before I came into my body, and my mom was in labor. And I remember being sung to. There were all of these beings around me that were singing. And each note, it was like, it was the most beautiful orchestra, the most beautiful choir you could even imagine, because it was all these different notes, but they were in perfect harmony. And it was actually the harmony, this harmonic wave that I rode down into my vessel. And it wasn't obviously words or English that they were singing, so I can't tell you like that there were lyrics or that there were words that were being spoken to me. But the closest translation that I could share with you what those sounds felt like, it was, the message was, we will be with you when you go, and we're going to stay with you.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you do or say, where you're going, it will echo in this space where you are right now. And that we're never going to be apart, even though you will feel that we are apart and it is going to be hard. We will stay with you. And so I rode that wave of sound down into my body until I opened my eyes there in that hospital room. I was 5.5 pounds. And I was the only redhead in the whole entire hospital.
Probably the whole country.
So it was very easy to find. And that was a signal, I think, right away that like you are going to feel different. You're going to feel strange. You're going to feel weird. You're going to feel like the only one from day one. So get used to it.
Well, it's so interesting because the way this even came about and how I knew it was time to even explore this with someone was I was taking this kind of self-hypnosis class that I signed up for on the Silva. It's called Mind Valley, and it's called the Silva Ultra Mind System. And this particular exercise is called the mental video technique. And what you do is you project kind of like a puzzle that needs solving that's happening in your life. And what I was projecting on this screen was, how do I open up and share more of myself and let others share as well? And like, what is the next step? Like, actually, I don't even remember saying how that others could share, but I was like, I know I need to, the way it felt was just ripple it out. How do I do that? Okay. And then the way they teach this is you put this on this mental screen and then you let it go. And you're the best times to do this are right when you wake up and before you go to sleep. So I did it right as I woke up, but then I kind of drifted off. And in that moment that I drifted off, you came in and were like, I'm stepping up. I'm ready. So I talked about it in a podcast, just saying like, I guess this is coming, and I haven't even talked to her, but I'm hoping she says yes. And what I like at the time felt was that it was like a mutual kind of like coming together because we both needed it. And so for me, I was like, okay, I can feel like comfortable in that, and also understanding that this whole podcast has been about the journey. And can I like create a space that feels safe enough for someone else to share theirs. That's kind of how it felt when I saw you come in. And so I'm curious how you received that invitation.
Yes. Okay. So I heard your podcast while I was on a plane. I downloaded it knowing that I would want to listen to it while I was traveling. So when I actually heard this invitation, and I knew that it was for me and to me, but when I heard this, I was how many thousand feet in the air, traveling at a very high speed. And that's exactly how it felt. It felt like, wow, this is big and I'm traveling fast, but this is also what I asked for. I will tell you guys, because maybe it might seem that I'm comfortable doing this. I have no idea. But just in case it does seem like this is coming naturally to me, I just want to clarify that this is the last thing I ever thought I would do. And I mean, sit here and tell my story and be seen and be heard. This feels like a huge leap for me. And I mean, when Gabrielle and I first had that human design reading, and I was, and then in our second one, I started to tell her about my leap. I thought I had been taking some pretty big leaps in life, but little did I know the biggest one was still to come, which is this one, this moment that I'm in right now with you doing this. It feels like crossing a huge barrier. Like I feel myself stepping beyond that, because I have opened my heart to this way of sharing. And my intention today in this moment with you guys is to open my heart enough that whatever comes through in the vibration of my voice is coming from a place that you are also connected to. Like, this is also your story. And I hope and pray that you see a reflection of yourself in this, because that is the reason I'm doing this. It's not because I think I have some incredible story or that my background is so unique, but I share it because if there is a chance that even one person hearing this will feel seen and heard the way that I know I have through Gabrielle's podcast, like, that is the greatest gift I could give anyone. And I have certainly received that gift from other people and from Gabrielle. And so I just want to pay a little bit of that back. And it's also asking me to expand and to break open and to investigate why it was such a leap for me.
Exactly. Like why it feels like it's such a, oh my God, I can't do it, but I have to do it. Because ultimately, like our biggest fears, there's a reason it became a fear, right? There's a reason that we, for example, both of us were told basically to be quiet and to not share that part of ourselves. And over the years of conditioning, it just gets kind of like more and more comfortable, so that when someone does show up in your life that says, okay, we're ready to break this wide open, it's like confronting. And then I know through our conversations, it's brought up so many pieces of your childhood, even that you remember, like even speaking light language and it not being okay. And that just like, I mean, I never was that connected growing up, so I don't know that, but I do remember being told to like sit there and not speak. So having those gifts coming in so early and then having to kind of shut them down, but also being around people, the adults that were able to speak them, must have been really confusing.
Yes. 100%. When this came up and I realized that I had a huge block around my voice, I, first of all, was so grateful for the opportunity to look into that, because I didn't fully know how much that block existed. But I'll kind of start at the beginning of this particular journey, because this is how it started. So I heard the the invitation through Gabrielle's podcast, and I was on the plane at the time that I heard that. But a few days before that, I was right here in my kitchen at home, and I was wiping the counters, and I suddenly had this, at the time I thought it was a daydream, but it was like a movie was playing in front of my eyes, and it was Gabrielle asking me to be a guest on her podcast. And I flipped out. I mean, my hands started sweating. My heart was racing. I was like breathless. I was like, oh my God, that's like my worst nightmare. And then as a way to calm myself down, I started telling myself, Faith, come on, that's crazy. She doesn't interview people. That's never going to happen. Why are you even worried about this? This is the most absurd thing. Where is this coming from? And now I realize that, of course, when we have those things and we have such a physical reaction in our body, that is not a daydream. I think it's taken me many times to finally get that through. I can be a little dense sometimes, but at the time, I truly thought it was just this little fantasy or something. Although I was very curious why I was fantasizing about something that was apparently my worst nightmare. But I had this whole this moment in this kitchen right here where I was able to meet that idea just in the thought form of it. Just what if Gabrielle asks you to be on her podcast and tell your story? And I got to witness my reaction to that, which was fear, panic, sheer panic. And it was like, no, like a hard no, like, no, I would never want to do that. And I hope it never happens. So a few days later, to be on the plane, not even on Earth, but like up in the air and going so fast, and to hear, oh my gosh, this thing that I encountered in the kitchen, no, it's real, and no, it's happening. And just to fully realize, like, okay, I was given a chance to get a little bit of a heads up on this because I needed to meet that moment and to see it as my next leap of faith.
Instead of shutting it down right away, because it would have felt like so confronting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was able to sleep on it and be with that thought and even start to realize, oh, there's something there. There's something I really don't want to look at. And just to hear like Gabrielle's vulnerability and even her asking me, that also encouraged me to meet that moment with my own vulnerability. Because I realized, like, oh, I'm not in this alone. Like, we would be doing this together. And she has been making these leaps and sharing them with us all along. So who am I to say that I can't do that? And to share.
Isn't it interesting too that I actually never asked you one-on-one? Like I asked you through the podcast. Maybe it was like a way to get the energy kind of building before we actually got to where we had the conversation so that you could go through your process. And I was also like, if it's meant to be, I'll put the energy out and we'll see. Like instead of going directly, like, let me text her and ask her. No, it wasn't like that.
Yes. So I heard about it on the plane. I was on my way to vacation, and I had planned to use that vacation to be completely offline, to not check in with anybody, not look at my phone. But because I had heard this episode and this invitation on the way there, what I was able to do is to use that vacation, that moment where you step away from your life. And we were in a beautiful place on the ocean, and I spent that week really starting to grapple with this of like, okay, let me first acknowledge by saying how freaked out I am. But then it's a yes, because it freaks me out and I feel the energy around this. And I know that it's asking me to expand my capacity. And that's why it's a yes. It wasn't a yes because it felt easy or it felt like the next natural thing to do in my own journey. It kind of took me by surprise, but I realized anything that has ever affected my life in a positive way has been through someone else's vulnerability. At the end of the day, it's been through them sharing themselves with me. And that has allowed me to be who I am. Anytime I've ever looked for input, the only input that's ever been valuable to me is when someone puts it all out on the line. Mm-hmm. And so why would I not want to do that for someone else, even if it's just one person? Mm-hmm. It's all a full circle. Like, that person is also me. I've been in that position. So we're all connected.
So I remember this started these conversations that we had back and forth through like voice text and or voice messages, because she started them and was like, look, I don't know when I'm going to get signal, so I'm going to record these and just send them off to you in the ethers. And when you get it, I would love, if you feel like you can respond. And what was so interesting is that week we were in Joshua Tree, and so we also were kind of off grid, but I was able to connect at the right times that it could come through and in the right way. And one of these recordings, she realized that she's on a boat, and she realized that she had been using her phone for the music on the boat. But she was kind of like slipping away to record these conversations for me. And then all of a sudden it hit you that, wait a second, are they listening to my conversations? Because I'm still on the speaker,
Bluetooth
speaker out on the boat. And then she went through this whole thing, which I would love for you to like explain what happened.
Absolutely. So it was one of the first voice memos that I had ever recorded. I think, when I got Gabrielle's invitation, at that point on my phone, I only had 2 or 3 voice memos I had ever recorded. And one of them was a session, like a reading. So I was recording someone else talking to me. It is just not a form of communication I was comfortable with, because like many of us, I didn't like the sound of my own voice. So it was a brand new way to kind of play with this idea. But I just figured, all right, I'm on a boat. I'll open my voice memos and I'll try this. Like, let's confront this, and it's not going to get easier just in my own head. I've got to actually practice this. So I opened up a voice memo and I started recording, and I just, like, my heart was pounding, even just like doing that. And I had kind of, found a nook on the boat where I thought I could be alone and kind of have a moment, because I was so nervous. And then, maybe after 5 minutes of just talking into my phone and being so nervous the whole time, I suddenly realized, I think I might be still connected to Bluetooth. And I think everything I just said might have played on every speaker on this boat. And I'm with like 6 other people who, are maybe not on this journey.
Oh God. Yeah.
And I felt sick to my stomach. I felt, I've kind of had that moment where you just want life to be over. I just felt like, if they've heard every word I just said when I was purposely trying to find some alone time and hide away.
But also like bearing your soul to me. Because really that's what it was. Like, totally.
And it was just this moment of, again, being confronted with this idea of, why does it scare me so deeply? That the fact that 6 other people in this boat heard every word I just said, because I am bearing my soul, and there is nothing to hide in that. And what I've come to learn and find out in this journey of, discovering my voice and healing that, is the word persona from the Greek. It means the sound of your soul. So like, we think of persona as like, our character or our personality, and that's kind of how we use the word now. But the true meaning of the word means the sound of your soul. That is who you are. I mean, sound is the creative principle of the universe. Mm-hmm. It's why we're all here. It is the infinite principle of creativity, sound. Mm-hmm. To be afraid of our own sound, to dislike the sound of our own voice. It's like, I really had to sit with what that meant. Like, do I really love all of myself the way that I think I do, and the way that I need to in order to embody my gifts? It has to start with love. through and through, so that I can embody the sound of my soul and begin to share that. That's why I'm here, and I want nothing less. I will not settle for anything less. And it was really hard in that moment to think like, wow, how vulnerable I might be. Like, I might have just shared the sound of my soul across every speaker on this boat with a group of people that I wouldn't have otherwise chosen to go that deep with. So
I just want to say, actually, I've received a download that by doing this very thing, we, through the tone of our voice, remind the people in our lives who we are. And so it allows them to like take a step back and then see us in a new light and then support that vision. But until we choose to like bring forward that brave, that, you know, that piece of us, the soul, they're thinking we're still in third dimension. So why would they evolve with us? So it's like they need each other. But of course, the fear is not that, you know, it takes over and it's like all about me and my fears about it. But really, everybody just wants to meet us on a soul level.
Yes. Yes. That's why we're here. Totally. Yeah, we're all like hiding away from each other, thinking like there's something wrong with us. And yes, it was interesting on that trip, in that 1 week vacation with that group of people, as I began to open up on this trip, you know, recording my little voice memos every day, which was a huge thing for me, not a big deal for most people. But as I began to open up, I watched every single person that I was with also begin to open up. And it was like a very immediate and tangible reflection of, this is real. When you open, everything opens. When you unfold like that blossoming flower, everything is starting to unfold because it's all related.
And these people you have known for many years and never gone down these paths with. And you just, by being vulnerable and putting it out there, it like almost felt like it dropped their walls to see, to let you in, to see a fractal of them that needed something and needed to be seen or heard.
Yes. And by the way, that voice memo that I was so afraid was being projected all over the boat, that did not in fact happen. Because what I came to realize later was, when you start recording, that's considered input. And the Bluetooth only picks up output. So like if I was playing music. But when I started to record, it gave me the moment that I actually did, which was that intentional moment of, you know, creating a little private space to share my heart with Gabrielle. And that was honored and that was supported. And yet I also was able to encounter this idea of, what if that hadn't happened?
Right.
And to release into that and surrender to what is. And what I came to realize before I found out that it did not in fact play over the Bluetooth, when I was still sitting with this idea of, I think every single person just heard me bare my soul, I came to the realization that if they did, if that is in fact what happened, then that is perfectly what was meant to happen. And just to be able to sink into that and relinquish that control that I was holding on so tightly of, I'll allow this person to see this little side of me, and this person gets a little bit of a window into my soul. But it's going to happen. And
I remember I asked you, did you ask them if they heard it? And you were like, no. You were like, I just went out there and was like, let's see what they say. Which is also just part of the flow, because that means you're owning what you said, regardless of who heard it.
Yes.
I do. I think, but to go through that whole like mini drama in the back of the boat until you got to this place of realization, like, this is for my own good, is just, yeah.
So that's how this journey began, and that was a few months ago. But ever since then, we've been working towards this moment right here, where we sit down and have this conversation together. And Gabrielle has held so much space for me as I stumbled along, you know, like when we're babies and we're learning to walk, first we crawl and we, you know, and she's just been there as I slowly took one step and then another, and just opened myself up. But I did have to practice for a while. It was very humbling when I first began this, and it still is, and I hope it always is, to be honest, because what I'm starting to realize is when I feel nervous, oh, I couldn't label that as, oh, I'm nervous or oh, I'm scared. But what is undeniable beyond the label is how I'm feeling. To me, in my body, it feels like I'm being electrocuted. I have actually never been electrocuted, so I can't promise that's what it feels like, but that's what I imagine it must be like this shock, like your heart starts racing, every nerve ending in your body is just like vibrating. And it feels like panic, it feels like terror, if I label it that way. But what I'm also realizing is that is my whole system acknowledging there is power here. You are touching power. Just like putting your finger in the socket, you're touching power. So yes, you're going to feel something, and you should feel something. That is your system doing what it is designed to do for you, to alert you to the fact that you have met the edge of your capacity. And it is your choice to go beyond that. And you're going to feel every bit of it. And that's how it should be, so that you know when you get to the edges, you feel that you're being shocked. And then you can use your free will to decide, am I ready, to go beyond that? And so I'm starting to develop a new relationship with those like shock waves, instead of saying, oh, that's scary, or oh, that's,
I want to talk about that actually, because you took a very big leap about a year ago. And this leap that you took was the leap that made me recognize you and see you and stop and not like slow down enough in that session we had to acknowledge what you had, like what you did. And I just want to talk about it because they grow. Like you're saying today, this one is the most important one, but I'm sure a year ago that one was the most important one. And the thing is that the more our capacity grows to accept more and more breaking down of our barriers, it feels like, oh God, again, it's here again. But I want people to know how you committed to this process.
Yes. Okay, so in March of 2022, I left my corporate job, and I had known that was happening for 3 months. I gave 3 months notice, and that was because I had reached a point in my life where all I knew, all I was certain of, was that there is more. There was more, and it was waiting on me to make space in my life to receive more, because it was for me. But at that time in my life, I had no container for it, so it couldn't come into my life. So I said, okay, how do I make more space for this? And I tried different things leading up to, putting in my notice. I tried, oh, maybe it's something I do on the side. Maybe it's a part-time thing. Maybe, I study Reiki and do that on the side. But all the messages I was getting was, nope, you have to take a huge leap, because you need to make a huge amount of space for what wants to come in. And it's up to you. You can do it or not do it. And I did want to do it. So I put in my notice. At the time, I had spent, at least a good 15 years of my life building up a certain career. I went to art school. I studied fashion design, and I had kind of taken some interesting twists and turns on my career path, but had always been working in a creative capacity. And I was very invested in the idea of making money by being a creative person. That was very important in my life and my paradigm at the time. The fact that I could, be self-sustaining and make a good salary as an artist, because obviously it's very easy to be a starving artist and to be creative and not to have, a certain lifestyle. So I had made a lot of decisions in my life around that idea of, doing very well, of being successful at being a creative person. That was very important to me. It was very validating. It was a larger part of my identity than I would like to admit. It was my religion at a certain point of my life, was my career. And it was starting to become who I was, to the point that if someone had asked me, on introduction, oh, tell me about yourself, or what, I would say, well, I'm Faith and I'm a creative director. And I would just like go into my my job and my career as if that's really who I am. And I started to really ask myself, well, who am I beyond all of that? And if it were to all be taken away tomorrow, who would I be? And who am I beyond that? And I also knew I'm never going to know until I experience it firsthand. So I can either co-collaborate with the universe in making this happen and do it with every ounce of my free will and, in an embodied way, or it might be something that happens and it might seem like, a dark night of the soul where, I lose my job and I'm suddenly confronted with having to build up who I am without that. So I decided to do it. Like either way, it's going to be hard, right? But I decided to do it with my free will. So I put in my notice, and for me, that was huge because I had been on this trajectory of, going from, success to more success. And at that point, I had gotten to the place that I had dreamed of. I mean, the little ladder that I created for myself, I had gotten to the top of the ladder. So I also started to look around and say, well, now what? Like I'm here and I've been working my whole adult life to get here, but I don't feel any different now that I'm here. I don't feel any better or, or more whole or complete. So what's it going to be? If it's not this, let's find out where my wholeness is really going to come from. And that's where I am so grateful for my background and, the spiritual wealth that I was born into, because I had something to really almost like rest on as a foundation of, I know there is an underpinning in life. And it's not just what meets the eye. It's not my job. It's not my title. It's not even my salary. I mean, yes, there are components of life that are necessary parts of being, right? We all need to kind of take care of ourselves and eat and have a place to live and those things. But I was also at a place in my life where I could put all of that on the line and trust that the universe would show up for me. And I mean, I'm also a hopeless romantic. I am in love with love. And to me, nothing is more romantic than the idea of just diving in headfirst to something you believe in and believing in something so much that you're willing to risk it all. And I think there's something in me that really craves those moments. And so I was grateful to be in the place where I felt I was ready to do that.
Right.
So I left my job without knowing what would be next. And that was entirely the point. I didn't want to have anything set up. I wanted to give myself a void to dive into. And everyone asked me, oh, what are you planning to do next? And I was like, I don't know. All I know is that I need to create this space in my life. And I'm going to honor that commitment.
I mean, it is only in the void spaces that we can experience something that we don't know, like whenever we think, even if our mind has like a thread of like, oh, I kind of want to spend time doing this. That's not it. You got to come from nowhere. And it has to like kind of take you by surprise because it's not coming from you, like it's something bigger. And to me, I talk about this, that it's like going through that spiral and going back to the empty vessel to then get the next level of spiral. And it happens in my case that it's been yearly that I go back to this really place of what's next. And I have no idea, and I know that if I did have an idea, it's my mind. Totally. Because it's going to be fearful. The thing that it actually is going to be is the thing that I at least want to do.
Totally. Right. Or at the least it's going to be a limiting thought because
totally.
Mind, right? But the beauty of the void is that's where we tap into infinite potential. It is the space of all things. So it's everything. I mean, it's tapping into something limitless, and that is what I wanted. So I will tell you where the journey went from there. After leaving the job and not knowing what I was going to do, I was driving down the road near our house, and this is a road I drive down very often, but I was driving down the road this particular day, a few weeks after leaving my job, and I saw a sign at a horse farm that said "Help Wanted." And I had seen that sign many times over years. They always need help. They always have a sign out. And just suddenly I thought, well, I've got some time on my hands, and I've always wanted to be around horses. That wasn't something available to me when I was growing up. Like, we didn't know anyone that, had horses. So I thought, why not give myself that opportunity? So I called them up and I said, hey, I've never worked with horses before, and I really know nothing about them, but I'm a hard worker and I learn fast. And if you're willing to teach me, I will show up and work at your horse barn. And they said, great, we need help, all hands on deck. So I started there 3 days a week. And 5 hours a day, I was shoveling horse poop.
Oh, I love it.
And I was loving every single moment of that. And what I did not know at the time, and I know only in hindsight, is when you create space for yourself, when you ask your higher self to come down, when you're looking to be embodied, when you're asking to be expanded, things come up. Things will come up. Things that you've tried to bury or put away, things that you've tried to shove down for years and years because you were too busy to deal with them or didn't want to face them. Mm-hmm. By the way, I had been through years of traditional therapy, so I had thought I had processed a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But working at that horse farm for a few months, I mean, I was alone with my thoughts, and I was doing some heavy lifting. And I was processing through my body in the act of shoveling horse poop, all of the things that needed to come up. And what I now know is if I hadn't had that opportunity to physically release and to kind of alchemize all the things that were coming up with the space that I had created, then I would have been maybe home alone as all of these things came up with no outlet to release them. It could have been a very dark time. Who knows? All I know is I was lucky enough or blessed enough to be open to that message, driving down the road and saying, yes, I think I need to call them and see if I can work there, not knowing why. And only in hindsight do I know how helpful that was to me to have a physical outlet as all of this was, because I had no idea what would come up. Right. What did come up was quite a lot of things that I hadn't been processing. And I also lost a huge friendship. My best friend of over 10 years was kind of being removed from my life. There was nothing I could do about it. It didn't come from something that I did or didn't do. It was beyond my control. So I was grieving the loss of that friendship. And I mean, being able to be around horses, this barn was run by a woman, so being in her energy, and honestly, shoveling horse poop for hours every day, it was a very unique way to move energy. Mm-hmm. And I never would have, thought of that on my own. That definitely didn't come from my mind. Mm-hmm. So it was a good place to be after so many years.
It feels like a reset too. Yes. Like a full, like going from the top of the ladder to the bottom of the barrel at the barn.
It's so true. I went from being this like fancy executive with a huge title and a big salary or whatever to I'm minimum wage.
Yeah.
Shoveling horse poop, But I love
that was like the breaking away of the ego that had been built too. Like and you saying, I'm ready. I'm ready. Let me at it. Yeah. Right? I mean, I love that. I do love that. And I feel like as like these things come up and we like leap towards them or take the risk, because we know deep down it is the next move. but it doesn't feel like your mind is like, okay, I'm in, let's go. But I feel like the more that we progress towards that, I don't even think they're goals. I just think they're like notches on our own timeline. The universe meets it. The universe supports it and is like, I mean, you can't even make up the synchronicities between us and this conversation because it was meant to happen. And I got some downloads for Richard last night or the night before that it's all just choosing our own adventure. But the more that we go and choose like a one that's at the time feels extremely pushing ourselves out of the womb, that means that you're ready for more risk, which means there's more reward in it. But if we choose like, okay, I'm going to stay in my career, but maybe I need a different company, that's a very slight move. So there's not, maybe you get a bump in pay, but that's it. But this like fully shedding and then like going back down to the basics of shoveling horse manure is like, I don't care. I'm here to just take it all. And I'm telling you, the way they explain it is it's all for our own like cultivation in our soul's depth. There's no right answer or wrong answer, because ultimately when you get to this level of knowing what you're here, like you're connected, it's what paths are lighting up for me now and what are my options to choose from, and then it becomes like you can see it as a game, like how when this invitation to do an episode with me came up, you saw, okay, this is just another part, and it maybe feels like it's more terrifying than leaving my whole career. But yes. I like, instead of the reaction on that initial when in the kitchen, you had time to like realize like, hold up, you felt this before. And I love your analogy about it feeling like being electrocuted, because it is energy. It's new energy that's ready to fill in those spaces that you've left room for. And I mean, there's nothing more. Like, this is what this life is for. If ever we get to this point where it's too comfortable, get ready, because the rug will be pulled out, or you need to use your free will to do it yourself.
It's so true. It's so
true.
Yeah. And for me too, I think to have like my name to keep going back to, like, wait a minute, my name is Faith. Like, this is the biggest reminder to me every day that like the vibration of who I am, it's Faith. And I came into the world in my parents' leap of faith, like in their moment of trusting, and that's what I crave. That's what I want. It's like it's just.
I want to talk about this though, because we have two completely different ways of having the faith.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge part of your journey as well. And like breaking down the conditioning of religion and in that container to finding it completely inside. Oh my God, this is so weird. I'm not even making this up. Yesterday, a Jehovah's Witness came and it's the second time someone has come from the church to talk to us. But yesterday I got into a big conversation with her and she kept bringing up the scripture. And I asked her, I understand you believe in the scripture, but do you also find it inside? And she said, no, it's the scripture. And I was like, so interesting. And it just kind of came full circle, because I was like, after the conversation, like, why did that happen? But I think it could have happened for this conversation, because taking it from being so in a way dogmatic on someone else's words to finding your own words and living that like dance and soul within your own vessel in a new way is what we're here to do. So I would love to hear that story with you.
Yes. So here's the thing. Now I know that I chose my parents and I chose every bit of my background and my upbringing. But there were many years that I spent forgetting that or not remembering that and thinking that this was somehow done to me or against my will, or why did I have to grow up in this kind of family? And I also want to say that I'm sure for many people who didn't live this experience, it sounds like it would be wonderful and idyllic and magical. And there were parts of it that absolutely were 100%. I grew up around some incredible people, some of the kindest people you'll ever meet. And everyone in my life, everyone in my parents' life were 100% committed to service to others. And that is everything at the end of the day, right? It doesn't, none of the other stuff matters. However, the way that my parents and the community I grew up in, the way that they chose service to others was through the church and through this form of spirituality called the born again experience, which is a very intense experience. And at times it maybe felt cultish almost, because it felt like you're either in or you're out. There's no one foot in, one foot out kind of thing. You're all in with this way of being and this way of, connecting with the divine. And as a child, I think it was overwhelming for me because my dad was a pastor. Even after they were missionaries and they came back to the States, my dad was always still a pastor of a church. And, I could clearly see that he chose that, or my parents chose that for themselves. But what it felt like to me as a child was that I wasn't able to fully choose the spiritual experience that I wanted, because it was handed to me. And I was told, well, this is what you believe. This is the best way. And we've already found it out. So we're just going to hand it down to you. And you just, tag along. And and that's beautiful, because they wanted to share with me something that was so true and so real for them that it completely transformed their life. I mean, it's not like they were asking me to live something that they weren't also living. They were 100% living it. And so I think in their minds, they were thinking, well, why wouldn't their children want to also be part of this amazing life that they've committed to? But the thing about any spiritual journey or any spiritual experience, the more free will that you have in choosing it, then the more real that experience is going to be for you. And I think because my parents were, in their early 20s and they had a spontaneous awakening and they were able to, from there choose their own adventure, that's so wonderful for them. But I think as a child, I was desperate to make that choice for myself. And so for many, many years, I spent thinking that choice was taken away from me. And I experienced that as a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. And there were many moments when, as a child, I had my own remembering of what you might call unity consciousness. I had my own remembering of being one with the divine, of being one with source, before I even came into my body. So anything that I saw in the world or in the church that didn't line up with my own experience, it created a big, like a dissonance. Mm-hmm. So when I saw someone, judging someone else, like in the church or whatever, it just, to me, it rubbed me the wrong way, because I was like, wait, this is not how it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. It was like this glaring thing. It felt like all I could see was the disconnect between what I knew to be this experience of being connected to the divine, and then what I was being told that it was supposed to be. Which to me, it felt like there's all these hoops you have to jump through. You have to say all the right things or do the right things or go through these certain motions to be accepted and to be, walking the walk or whatever. And I mean, something in me wanted it so deeply, but I was fixated on the things that didn't match up with my own experience. Mm-hmm. And so that started to create this duality and this almost like double life, where I learned pretty quickly to say all the right things, do all the right things, show up and, be performing the role of a good Christian or the born again experience. I certainly didn't want to rock the boat. My dad was a pastor, and I loved my family. I didn't want to cause trouble. And yet I knew there's something in me. The only way this is ever going to be real for me is if I can choose it for myself. Mm-hmm. And so of course, in hindsight now, I see it, as in this way, where I needed to get very far away from everything I had been told so that I could turn around, look at it with perspective, and begin to walk my own path, either back to some things and reconnecting parts of myself or exploring brand new territory. Either way, I needed to regain every ounce of my free will, because that is the most precious thing we have in this life. Our free will is what enables love. I mean, you can only love something when you choose it. And the more you choose it, the more you love it, the more choice you have. And then when you give that, that's everything. So I spent many, many years running away from my background in order to recollect all my free will, so that I could then embody my free will and say, yes, I have gotten to the point where I am my own person. And now I choose, and I choose with my full heart, whatever that is. And it is this life. It is this life of taking leap of faith after leap of faith. And it does look different than how my parents did it, because I'm not part of an organized religion. However, they gave me the most incredible spiritual heritage. It's like being born to rich parents and then like resenting them for giving you all the wealth and being, wait a minute, I want to go out into the world and earn my own money. I appreciate the value of money. That it was like
Totally.
that, but spiritual.
Because I remember you said your dad would be able to speak in tongues, and that was like a normal thing for you, where I was like, that wasn't my normal reality. But
Oh yes,
it encouraged you to then start like letting energy flow through you as a child. So I feel like, of course, no matter how it's geared, it's still energy that you knew there was a connection.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you bring that back up, because I think that is related to the voice and the block that I felt. So yes, when I was a child, I remember being very connected. And there was one time in particular, I was probably, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, and we were visiting a farm. And so we were out in the country, and we were visiting. This was a friend who had a dairy farm, and I just remember that feeling of being out in nature, and there were fireflies and all these rolling green hills, and I was running around, and I was singing in my light language, in my angelic tongue, just as an expression of how happy I was, and just as like. But I guess I was being too loud. And my mom called me over, and, she said, can you kind of quiet down? You're being disruptive. And of course, that's a totally normal thing to do, and I don't hold that against her. But in hindsight, it was one of those many little signals that you get as a kid about, don't do that, you're being too loud. Or, I'd have many questions too, so many questions about the Bible or about this spiritual experience that we're having. And I really loved asking my parents questions, and my dad was a pastor, so like that's his job, was to answer people's questions about the Bible and scripture. And yet I noticed very quickly as a very young child that there were certain questions that didn't go over very well. And so I kind of had to stifle some of my curiosity. And, some of those questions were related to imbalances around the feminine and masculine, and why there were no women speaking in the church we were a part of, or why none of the books that were on my dad's bookshelf were written by women, and or even questions about the scriptures were things that to me were very legitimate and that really mattered to me, and yet it was kind of like it was shut down a little bit. So yes, it begins to create that split in who you are, and you realize, okay, I'm going to have to figure out a way to be authentic to myself in my own, my own heart and my own mind. But you start to think other people can't handle it,
like you're too much.
You're too much. And I also knew at a certain point when, when I could no longer perform the role of, the daughter that goes along with what the parents are doing, that was going to hurt my parents very deeply, because it was so real for them. And, they wanted it for us so badly. And so for me to start having those conversations as a teenager, when I said, this isn't for me, or if it is, I need the chance to choose it for myself. And I don't even know how to go about doing that because I have no space, no distance, no perspective from this. I would want to come to this on my own, if at all possible. And so that's been a long journey with my parents and I coming to a place where we can see each other for who we are. And I spent a long time resenting my parents. But now I've come full circle and I can see.
Well, you were homeschooled by your mom. And
the
biggest full circle is that after going out on your own and finding your own place of void, you guys came back together to create something. And to me, that's like the most beautiful, like, circle of life, when you can, like you said, in hindsight, see the gift of your upbringing as what it was.
Yes. Yes. I was homeschooled until college. Like home with my mom, receiving the most amazing education, by the way. My mom's an artist and a very gifted teacher. And I was a very sensitive soul. I still am. I think I would have completely fallen apart if I had to go to public school or be around a lot of other kids my age. But of course, at the time, I didn't appreciate what I had. And I felt so weird and so different and like, oh, why do I have to be homeschooled? And, everyone thinks I'm so weird. And it was, one of those things that I resented for a long time, which now is one of those things that I am so grateful for. It's absolutely made me who I am. But here's the thing. I think when we come to love who we are and where we are, we start to realize that everything that has ever gone on in our life has all been conspiring to get us to this point. But it has to start with loving who we are and where we are now. Because then it allows the past to flow backwards from the present, as opposed to just carrying it around all the time like it's this junk. It's everything. It's made you who you are. And when you start to be grateful for that in the now, it can't help but flow backwards, and you see how it's all related to get you here. And oh my gosh, who would I be if I wasn't homeschooled? I'm almost scared to think about it because I was so protected and so blessed to be homeschooled. And now I know that. And I feel sad for the years I've wasted, like resenting it or trying to.
It's kind of like the conditioning that we all go through, whether if it's from like having to go to school and all the bullying and trying to be exactly like your friend. I remember always wanting to be Jennifer because that was the popular name. But you just received a totally different type of conditioning, which to me meant that you were supposed to go deep into your own protected bubble and also understand that in that bubble there was more.
Yes.
So like, you're not, at least my impression of you and what I know of you, the external stuff isn't as important as the internal, because that's what you grew up knowing, which is just, it's beautiful.
Absolutely. And that's where I'm able to see the fullness of my story and how I chose that. I chose my parents. I chose that experience because I knew that's what I would need to get here. Totally. So it's all for us. And even the fact, growing up, we were told there was really no choice about this. We were reading our Bible every day. Like that was just the thing that we did, right? But as a kid, it feels like, you're being told to do it. You're not doing it out of like your own desire. You're like, this is like a chore. Like I have to read my Bible every day. But guess what? Apparently, I really wanted the scriptures, these holy codes to be deeply imprinted in my subconscious. And I chose that because I wanted that and I need that. And to this day, I pull things out that I don't even know are in there because they're so deeply in there. That was apparently important to me. I did spend many years like not, being aware that that's what I wanted, but
Right.
that's okay.
Right. But like even in, we had a little short conversation about the angelic pearls 144 and how she interprets the scripture. And it's like actually, I'm curious for you to share like your experience of seeing it from a different lens.
Yes. So for me, my first encounter with the Bible was an experience of having it be taken very literally. And that was one of the things that caused dissonance in me, because as a child, when I read it, I could see the fact that everything about the Bible was allegorical. It wasn't meant to be taken literally.
You already knew. Yeah.
There were codes and lessons, but you had to go deeper. But if you stayed on the surface and took it literally, as, oh, this person said this and did this, then you missed kind of a lot of the point. You missed like 90% of it.
Totally.
But, I was often confronted with like, no, it's literal, and just, so it felt very like analytical or black and white. And then it was being like, forced down my throat, as I thought at the time, because I was like being told to read the Bible every day, and it was like a chore. And so there is that in me, which is still like, I'm still confronting what that means. And yet I'm holding on for dear life to the fact that like, there is more. I always knew there was more. As a child, I wanted to put myself in a situation where I would be, even if it felt like I was being force fed at the time, it's because it was like vitamins. I needed it. I need it now. It's up to me to go deeper and to, it almost showed me how bad I wanted it.
Oh.
How bad do you want to really go deep? Because you're going to be given everything on the surface, and you're going to want more, and you're going to have to fight for it.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, every, if it's scripture or even like mystery school knowledge, esotericism, it is all the same thing. They're just showing it in different ways, right? Like, like I talk about how nothing is what you read. Like when you get to the point where you can go between the words and actually see the vibration behind what's being said, then you're like, holy shit, this existed this whole time. And I didn't have maybe it's like your vibration isn't there to pick up on the nuances. But even in that book 144, and how she literally breaks down the scriptures, I'm like, it's the same stuff that we're teaching now. It literally is. But I mean, it's ancient knowledge and it's been so prevalent and out there. But I would say, I don't know if it's the masculine kind of taking over as everything being so literal, and we're missing the emotion behind it. And what is it actually saying? It's like coded. Everything is coded in this world. I swear.
Yes. And the further I got away from the religion, like in my 20s, I started, doing yoga, studying tarot, crystals, all of these different things, the chakras. It actually all helped me point everything back to, oh, yes, like it's all connected. For instance, there's a psalm, there's one of the scriptures talks about in Psalms, it's a song to God, and it's you lead me beside still waters, and it talks about the green pastures. And when I realized that the heart chakra is green, it's like suddenly that scripture makes sense. Like the green pastures are your heart, like,
and the still waters are the emotions flowing.
And then you learn about tarot, and the cups are the emotions. And so suddenly everything starts clicking.
Yeah.
But for me, it wasn't until I got pretty far away from it.
Right.
Come back with a whole new understanding. And I'm still in that process.
Okay. So I want to also touch on, like, in this void that you created, you opened up a chance for your mom and your relationship to create a new path that became a creation in itself. And I would love to hear you talk about it.
Yes. Okay. So when I quit my job, I had no idea what was next. But one of the first things that came up was that my mom, at almost 65, was at a unique point in her life, because she had been an artist and an art teacher for many, many years, and she taught adults and kids. But she was kind of at this point where she, most people are thinking about retirement, and she felt like she had so much more to give, but didn't quite know where to start. And she had been trying on her own with different things, doing classes, doing workshops, doing live paintings where she would interpret an event. And, she'd taken it really far, but she still felt like there was more. And so since I had just quit my job and I was coming from a marketing and branding background, I sat down with her and I said, hey, why don't I give you a couple months and I'll treat you like a client, and, treat me like an agency. Tell me what you want. I'll help you market yourself. I'll help you, do some positioning, and thinking that it would just be like this fun little project, and I'd set my mom up and, maybe set up some passive income for her. Maybe it would be, printed calendars or journals or little things like that with her beautiful artwork. Little did I know, there was so much more in store. But first of all, I want to say that working with my mom in any capacity feels like possibly the most miraculous thing that has ever happened to me in my life, because I spent many years not being able to be with her or around her. A lot of that had to do with how I grew up, some of the resentments, which was up to me to deal with and to transmute. But also, at the end of the day, with my mom in particular, because I had a lot of hurt and resentment with my parents in general, with both of my parents for a time. Luckily, we've worked through that and moved past that. But my mom in particular, it felt inexplicably difficult to be in her space sometimes. And that it did hurt me very deeply to acknowledge that, because I would see other people come around her, other young women, enjoying her presence and saying things to me like, wow, your mom is so incredible. You're so lucky. You must be so happy to have her as a mom. And I would be jealous of people that could see her that way, because I knew that it was true. And I knew it was me that couldn't see that in her. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was tough, because I didn't know how to get to where I wanted to be, which was a relationship with her. And, I kept working through, the pain or the resentments that I had. But it was really when I realized that my mom, for me in my life, specifically my mom, is the closest reflection of me that I have in this human experience. And anything that I cannot face in her is because I cannot face it in myself. Oh. And I had to really sit with that and realize there's something in me that I don't love. Mm. And until I find that wholeness in myself, I'm not going to be able to be around my mom, because I'm a lot like her. I mean, and that's the best thing that I could say. That's the highest compliment, because she's so incredible. And I knew she was. I always knew she was. She's a truly exceptional person. It just felt like the magnets were turned in the opposite direction. And anytime I was around her, it was like repelling for me. Yeah. But in that, she gave me the most beautiful gift, which was to allow me to see through her the reflection of what I needed to heal in myself, and to be that closest, deepest reflection of who I am, She's a Libra, I'm a Libra. Our birthdays are a week apart. She's a woman, she's an artist. She's a highly sensitive soul. She's incredible. She's very empathetic. And there was no reason on the surface why our relationship wouldn't have been wonderful. And yet for many, many years, it was practically non-existent. But that just shows me the areas where I didn't have a relationship with myself. So, in journeying back to myself and seeing myself and loving all of who I am, I was able to see my mom. I was able to be around my mom without like that magnetic, without the pushing apart. And now it's like the magnets are turned in the right way and we're like this. It's like the alchemical marriage with yourself. Like it has to start there.
But even think about this, like if you weren't in that void space, would it have ever happened? Probably not, because you needed the space to allow it to really see it.
Yes.
I mean, I would say the same with my mom living with us right now. It's like seeing all the things that, you grew up with, and you get into these patterns, and if you're conscious, you're like, but I want to break this pattern because it's this, I'm not the child anymore. And it's like working through these circles together and then acknowledging that they were also a child. My mom was a teenager when she had me, and she did her best. And then you can kind of like radiate out that kind of compassion for the entire experience that I experienced,
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So my mom and I began working together. And at first I thought it would just be, a short little consultation period. But it has taken on a life of its own. And I think as our relationship has been blossoming, the project that we've undertaken has been a reflection of that.
Yeah.
So we've followed the threads essentially, and with each of us trusting our own purpose and what we're here to do, and embodying our own gifts, and trusting each other, and coming together to kind of overlap our gifts and combine them and ask truly our higher selves to come through us. And we have asked to be a conduit and a channel for what wants to come through. And we've offered ourselves up, our time, our gifts, and dedicated this collaboration to how can we create something that will be of service to others? What is the most authentic way for us to share our gifts? And what has come out of that, it's been over a year now that we've been working on this project. It's called Scratch the Deep. Obviously a play on words of scratch the surface. And so if the surface is what you see with your eyes or perceive through your external senses, the deep is what's beyond that. The deep is what is in you. So Scratch the Deep for us, it's a way to deepen relationship with yourself, which is the journey that I'm on and my mom is on. And by the way, circling back to, their story with the church and religion and all of this, I would say my parents have both transcended that. They no longer go to church, although there's nothing wrong with going to church, but they are evolving and they are still on that journey that they started in their early 20s. And I commend them so much for staying open, even when you find something and you think, oh, this is it. I found it. I figured it out. And even when you change your whole entire life in service to that, then be able to put that back on the altar and say, okay, I'll give up even that, even the thing that I thought is everything, because there's more. There's more. But if we think that the menu is the meal, and we lose out on the meal.
Well, and think about that. Most people, they don't challenge themselves, so they would stay in whatever the thing is for the rest of their life because it's safe. It's what they know.
Yeah.
But I mean, your parents, especially your dad being a pastor, completely changed his career and changed his, I mean, they both have. So, I mean, and I would say, well, because they were always connected, it was just a matter of time to work through that. I mean, think about this though. Back in the 80s, what there were pockets of spiritual people, but it wasn't that accessible unless you went to India or, you know, you were taking psychedelics.
Exactly.
So I can see why, like, would we all be in a religion if that were the case now? So for them to evolve with the times, to me, feels like true connection. I mean, they've been connected. They just like expressing it in different ways.
Yes, exactly. But I think the longer you're on this journey, the more it becomes a sacrifice, because it's so easy to think you found it, right? And to feel like, yes, this is it. This is what I've been searching for. But then what if you're asked to even put that up as a sacrifice to gain even more, you know? So it really never ends. I mean, they're in their mid 60s and they're still doing it. And I've had a front row seat, and it is not easy. It is, but they have total commitment. And I think that's gotten them through it. At every point, they come back to their center and they remember why they do this. And it's for love, and it's trusting that direct experience of the divine. They know that that's real. And so whatever else happens in life, they still always have that experience of directly meeting God.
Right.
And everything else falls into place from there. But back to Scratch the Deep. For us, like, okay, so we know it can be difficult to meditate, right? We're always told, like, okay, just sit and meditate, but it's really hard. It can be really, really difficult or take years to feel comfortable with. But we all know there's so many benefits to it, to clear the mind, to come to that place where you can be open to the connection, to what wants to come through, for the downloads, for the just even feeling your own expansiveness, right? We forget in the busyness and the distractions of our lives how perfect we are in our own way. But how can we get there? You know, certainly meditation is a way. But for people who find it very challenging to meditate, our goal is to provide a practical, hands-on way to get to that same place of clearing the mind, tapping into the intuition, you know, diving into your subconscious, but doing that in a way that feels accessible for the average person, even for people who are not on the spiritual journey. So my mom, out of all of her years of experience teaching people how to be creative, because many people say, oh, I'm not creative, I can't make art. The thing is, each one of us is creative. Every single time we make a choice, that is our creative power. And the more we embody that, the more our life begins to be that dance, because we start to understand, oh, I have full responsibility for my life. And I don't mean responsibility like the weight or the burden. I mean your ability to respond, your responsibility in life. That is up to you. And there's infinite choices at every point. It's that choose your own adventure, and that's your creativity. But how can we make that real for someone? Because that's everything. And the more accountability you take for your life and realize this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. But even that shift in the mindset, how do we get there? I mean, for me, it's been a very long journey, but my mom and I are trying to, you know, think, well, what are the shortcuts? How can we offer this back to someone and say, here's everything we've learned in terms of how to change your mind and get to the place where you can open to a different perspective. And everything changes. So the technique is you take a pencil or a pen, and using your non-dominant hands, you'll be guided through an activity. And this is usually a very repetitive motion, so it becomes like a moving meditation. And we set you up with an intention, And then at the end of the activity, you're given a journal prompt to go deeper and to process your experience. But what happens when you use your non-dominant hands is you're automatically tapping into your intuition and your subconscious. It's like a shortcut. And many of us go through life doing almost everything with our dominant hand. So then there's a part of us and a part of our brain which becomes almost overdeveloped, and leaving all of the other side of us kind of underdeveloped, like a muscle. And, you'll have one strong arm and one arm that's like weak. So in using the non-dominant hand, which for many people is the left hand, and we also know the left hand is directly connected to the heart. Yeah. So it's this beautiful way to connect with yourself and to take a moment, 15 to 20 minutes, and it will feel like a meditation. And yet you're not going to be sitting there, trying to not be distracted.
Yeah.
Yes, you're given a task, and that's so good to your analytical mind to be able to do something. And yet that task itself will drop you into that deeper meditative state. So my mom is the architect of these activities, and she's taking, all of her decades of experience to shape these beautiful activities. And then because my background is like designing and writing and packaging, I'm able to kind of package this in a way that we can share it with people. But that is what we're working on. And it has taken us to some very interesting places in our relationship, and the project itself has taken on a life of its own. But we're very excited to share that with others, because the whole point of it is to help people feel better and to reduce anxiety, to get to the place where they realize their own greatness, truly.
And I think too, like reaching another part of the collective that isn't able to silence the mind on their own, right? Like, I mean, even Richard, he wouldn't be able to meditate. And I mean, for me, for me, it's like, I've gotten to a place where I don't need to go into meditation to get them now. But in the beginning, it was an active practice of understanding that I needed to slow down. And really, I think that's what it ultimately is all the things that are filtering through us, they need to be put on a shelf so that something else can move through. But if you give the mind an activity, it's not feeling like it's being told, you're bad, sit in the corner, So I feel like this definitely is a way to start bringing in more people into something that they feel is the right way to experience life. They just don't know how to get there. So I'm so excited for this to come out. And I know last we spoke, you guys were still in the process. So I hope that when it does come, you let me know. And
you'll be the first to know.
Can we say that again?
Yes, you guys will be the first to know. Maybe with the Energy Tribe, we can even do some of the activities.
I would love that. I would love it. Now, I want to just touch on, because we're already at 1:40 minutes, but I mean, I love the conversation. But I have written down a couple of things that as we've gotten to know each other, that you have shared with me as tools. And I am a big believer in tools, because they're basically manifestations of those like sparks that remind us who we are. So I was hoping that you could share an artist that you brought to my attention. And as we do that, I actually added, I'm going to add some images. Let's see if this, there we go. Oh, it works.
Yes. Okay. So I wanted to share these two things with you because like these two things have been huge in my life in different ways. And I hope for anyone that this lands with, that you can, enjoy it, and that it helps you in the ways that it's helped me. So yes, one of these things is discovering an artist named Hilma Af Klint. And talk about realizing that you are not alone, that there are others like you, and you are supported beyond your wildest dreams. This woman was working at the turn of the century, so in the early 1900s, when there were very few women artists in general, or they were not very celebrated. And she was working in a way that it was actually so ahead of its time. And in terms of like being an art critic, like that's what everyone says, but that's besides the point. She was channeling these paintings, and that is why she was ahead of her time. But between 1906 and 1915, she painted, and I wrote this down because I don't want to get it wrong, 193 paintings. And each and every one was channeled. So before these paintings came about, she had spent 10 years in regular channeling sessions with a group called the Five. So Hilma Af Klint and 4 other women would get together regularly and just first have a firsthand experience of what it meant to connect with the divine and to see what wants to come through. And after 10 years of doing this, a series of paintings was given to Hilma Af Klint. And she brought them through onto canvas, but she says when they came through, they were fully formed. So she was just painting, and she said it took very little effort. They came through. So, I mean, these are clearly mystical diagrams. These are like, there's sacred geometry in here. There are codes. These are symbols meant for us. And when we view these beautiful paintings, not only are they just gorgeous to look at, but there is information in here that will expand our consciousness. And she knew this to the point that when she died in 1944, she specified that her work should not be shown for 20 years because she knew that the world was not ready for these codes. And that happened. Her family kept her wishes. And so in the 60s, her work started to be shown, but it actually took many more decades for anyone to really catch on. And then finally in 2019, there was an exhibit at the Guggenheim. So some of you may have heard of her at this time. This is when I found out about her. But the cool thing is, when she was, still alive, she received a vision that these paintings would someday be shown in a building that was a spiral, an upward spiral. And at that time, the Guggenheim did not exist as a building. It was built after she received that vision. I think after she passed. So, her vision came to pass. The Guggenheim is a spiral building, and these paintings were shown there, and it broke every attendance record in the museum's history. And this is an artist who was very unknown at the time. I had never heard of her, and I went to art school. I mean, I went to Italy.
Me too, and I
but I think it's for a reason. It's because we were not ready until now. But I think we're ready, guys. So I mean, there are books that are just starting to come out now. I mean, I think just last month, her biography came out. Her family, co-signed an autobiography, which is the first official autobiography. So, sorry, not auto, biography. So yeah, I mean, there's still so much more information to be coming out, and people are really just now starting to research her. But you can go online, you can Google Hilma Af Klint, and you can look at many of her paintings. And of course, if you're interested, there's some books that you can purchase. But just to look at these images.
So this one is called The Tree of Knowledge. And I just have, so I actually, after learning about her, I have a screensaver of her on my computer. So I wanted to share some images that really spoke to me. This one in particular, when we found out about her, is the circle. It's called the circle, and it is the 5. And this is what, as Faith just explained, how they had this channeling group and they got together and shared this energy. To me, this painting is a circle of energy, and it's, as you can see in each of these pods, it's different energy, and it takes all of it to create that geometry in the middle. And to me, it's everything. So this one's my favorite, but I also have one more that is another favorite, which this one is untitled. But I mean, it's everything. And I feel like man, was she so ahead of her time, and knowing it. She didn't show any of these paintings back then. She painted them basically for herself in her studio. And what I read is she was well known enough to have sponsorship. She did a lot of uh, still life and landscapes, which supported her work and afforded her a studio. But these works she didn't share. And then she kept them in her will on lockdown for 20 years. And then after that 20 years passed, I believe it was her grandson or nephew, I can't remember, who went to the museum that she wanted them to go to, and they declined the offer. They said, no, we're not interested at this time, only to fast forward how many more years, like another 50, to where she's the biggest selling out artist in all of the history of the Guggenheim. It's like, I mean, I have goosebumps just thinking about it. These pieces to me hold such codes that just were coming through at a time that I'm sure these women knew that it just wasn't time yet. I mean, I think I read, or maybe you told me, that it was around the same time as Madame Blavatsky. I can't say
Blavatsky, yes.
Blavatsky. And so it was like coming up, but there weren't artists at this point. It was like just like these ideas were percolating, and these separate groups were starting this area of thinking and thinking outside of themselves, allowing energy to move through them. And I feel like it's just so beautiful that it's coming out now for us. It's like a time capsule.
Yes,
Right.
it is. And I think it's a good way for us all to remember whatever gifts you have, like there's a time for them. And it may not be, on your timeline when these things get shared with other people, but just know that whatever gift you have, it's going to affect others, in the way that it's meant to. And sometimes that it's so out of our control. And we were sitting here talking about Hilma, and she passed many years ago, but we're still talking about her.
Yeah.
And if it's okay, I'd actually love to read something.
Oh, I would love that.
This was found in her notebook. So there's no introduction about this, but this is clearly channeled. So she wrote this, but I believe this was not just her words, but this came through her. This is from September 16th, 1903. You are bewildered by what we have told you, but the phenomenon we are trying to explain is truly bewildering. What is this phenomenon, you ask? Well, beloved, it is that which we want to call the secret growing. How often have we heard you say that everything is futile, that nothing comes of all your labors? Yet, like amorphous buds, your endeavors sprout in all directions. You see everything as formless, and you forget that this is a sign of life. Gradually, the formlessness takes on more precise contours, and the steadily growing roots feed an ever stronger plant, which will one day explode with an abundance of leaves and flowers. You know this is so, but you must perceive this knowledge with such vividness that you dare to build on it. You have to feel with certainty that even the smallest effort to grow in goodness leaves a clear trace inside you. When you do not see an outer result, this must not discourage or tire you in your efforts. For just as invisible hands help and tend every plant on this green earth, so every budding sprout of goodness is tended and shaped and protected by invisible powers. And when the time comes, your eyes will open, and you too will see the beautiful plant that grew in secrecy, the product of your noble endeavors and your pure intentions. Accept our account as a greeting from us, so that you shall never tire when all seems lost. To me, that is faith. That feeling with certainty that even the smallest effort will leave a trace. that idea of, these invisible forces working for us. And even when we don't see it or don't know it, just to trust in it, but to really trust, like to have that feeling, to perceive
I ha-
knowledge with such vividness that you dare to build on it.
I had this conversation with Zanita, who is the author of the book that I recommended. And I asked her, like, I was trying to find out the purpose of what she does now, what I'm doing now, what is the purpose? And as I was asking the question, I got a very clear download that they're the breadcrumbs. We are the breadcrumbs. We are just here to create an easier path for those before us. And if you think about, like, I'm really into music, especially spiritual music, and those people are just like further up on the journey. It's not that they're better, they're just longer on the process, and they're leaving breadcrumbs too, and they're coded, like, because I can hear now between the words, I know what's coded. And this artist was doing the same thing, but so long ago. And whatever we share our voice to share as well, it's the same thing. We're just dropping the breadcrumbs for that vibration to pick up when it's time for their timeline to cross ours. And so I asked Anita, she's an oracle that's overseeing 1,000 souls that are here as part of the elect. And so I asked her, well, how many of these 1,000 souls have you encountered? And she said, don't worry, dear grasshopper. And I was like, that's when I was like, oh, wait, you're just leaving the breadcrumbs. And am I the only one maybe at this point that's crossed timelines with the breadcrumb? And think of it that way. Like, they are here. We just have to get ourselves matched up with that cross point of timeline to where it just is like, no wonder, and so that's why I believe we're all being called to speak, because in this day and age, that's the easiest way for people to find the breadcrumb. So, I love it. And I just love that maybe we don't see it in this lifetime, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The whole point is putting that vibration out, and that's what matters.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about is I haven't looked into it because I wanted it to come through you, but it's another tool that you have found extremely helpful.
Yes. Okay. This is huge. So during COVID, before, I had my big awakening moment or took a big leap of faith, I had started this. But now in hindsight, I see these were the breadcrumbs. This is the thing that I needed to do to get myself, like, it's like going to the gym, and you get yourself to the point where then you can do the heavy lifting. So little did I know, because I thought this was just a workout. It's called The Class, but it is so much more than a workout. And it's funny, I use the analogy of going to the gym, because it quite literally is a physical workout. But here's the thing, guys. If you're sensitive to energy, that comes with a responsibility. That comes with being a person and a human out in the world with a body that's responding to energy. And it can cause us a lot of discomfort sometimes. We have to know how to move it. And what I realized is, years ago, I did not know how to move energy through my body. So when it came on and I felt every bit of it, I would just become completely overwhelmed, and I would shut down. So what The Class has taught me through practicing it is how to stay centered when you're put in uncomfortable positions. So the design of The Class is essentially, there's one movement per song. So it's a squat or a lunge, or you're holding a plank. And you're doing this in, rhythm music and guided instruction. But the whole point of it is to watch your thoughts while you're in an uncomfortable position. Because of course the mind is going to start saying, this is too hard, I can't do this, just drop the plank or stop the squat. But it's like, can you do one more? Can you breathe through it? Can you modify it if needed? And those are all tools that I use now in the real world, in my everyday life. But I practice them on the mat with The Class. And you need nothing but your body and a mat, or you can just do it on the floor, whatever. But the movements that you go through, they will escalate your heart rate. which is good for us, right? On just a very surface level, it's great to get our heart going. But what I've noticed is when I feel overwhelmed or when I feel anxious or when someone is, talking to me in a certain way, my heart will start to race. So when I put myself in positions where my heart's racing and I'm able to be alone with myself and to develop ways to deal with that when it happens, then when it happens out there in the world and my heart is racing, I'm like, oh, I remember how to do this. I remember how to breathe through it. I remember how to be with myself and not abandon myself. So it's a way to regulate your actual nervous system. And if you're a sensitive person, which I think anyone listening to this podcast probably is highly sensitive, it is just an indispensable tool for teaching your own body how to regulate itself. And at the end of the class, you do something called a heart opening, which it has nothing to do with the workout and everything to do with like training your heart to open. And like, it's so beautiful. And you use sound throughout the process to move energy. So that can sound like a or like a whatever you want it to be. I will tell you that has saved my relationship, because what used to happen is all the tension would build up, all the energy that I take on in my body, and it would have to come out somewhere. So I would, have this like emotional outburst where I'm like yelling at my partner. But little did I know, it's because I just needed to move that energy. So now I close the door in the bedroom. I, vocalize on the mat, like from the gut, you just let it out. And that has saved like so many arguments not happening, because that tension hasn't built up. I'm able to like intentionally or proactively release it on the mat, even in just 30 minutes. But what I notice is if I don't do it for a few days, my body will actually ask me to do it. My body will say, hey, remember me? You haven't like moved with me in a while, and I need to move because I'm a physical human being and I'm like holding on to all this energy. So my body will literally start begging me, like, please do that thing. Please do that thing. So I go, I close the door, I get on the mat, I start the class. You can just watch it online and do it along with the group. It's just amazing, and I hope it helps you the way it's helped me. It just felt like such a grounded tool, like an actual practical thing I can do to give myself space.
Yeah. I'm like, as you were talking, when I get to that point, what I do is I'm looking for split ends in my hair, and I just zone out and focus on something to try to like numb. Actually, one person called it self-soothing, but if there is a way to like actually move that energy through, I'm like all ears, because I've been trying to like, I know when it's happening, it means a lot of information's coming in, and my nervous system can't handle it. So it just reverts to comfort. But I'm like, I'm in. I'm like, I want to try this because I need an outlet for it.
I think we all do.
I mean,
yeah.
totally.
So this woman who started, her name is Taryn Toomey. I've never met her, but she's incredible, and you can look up her story. She had a rough upbringing, and she developed this because it's the tool she needed. And so she started doing this intuitively because it's just what her body was craving. And other people started saying, hey, I want to do this too. And now she shares this online with however many people do it, probably a lot, but I'm one of them. And I will tell you, it's so incredible. And I would recommend, if you try it, I think there's like a free 30-day trial, but if you try it, I would recommend doing a class with Taryn, because she's the founder. And I think it'll give you a really good sense for just her, because this method came from her. However, there are many other teachers now, and you can go into different styles of the class. But it was developed by a woman named Taryn Toomey, and I think that's why she's on this earth, to give us this tool. It's something we all really needed.
Yeah. And are the classes like already pre-recorded, or do you have to like make it to a class?
Both. So you can
they have both.
Class, or there's on demand, and you can do it at any time. And you can even filter with like how you're feeling. Do you want like a slower class? Do you want to like, do you want something more fiery, so you can really kind of like burn?
Oh, okay.
It's so a lot of
excited. I'm excited. I'm glad that I waited for you to explain it to me, because I did go to the website and it looks beautiful, but I was like, do I need this? I don't know.
The thing is, it's very hard to describe. You have to
Yeah.
try it. So if it calls to you, just try one or two
Yeah.
classes. I will tell you that I cry almost every single class, and I'm often very surprised. I find
Mhm.
myself like bawling and weeping, but it's clear that it needed to happen.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I'm grateful that it's happening on the mat in this beautiful
Mhm.
moment that I'm giving myself by taking time for myself to do this. Because otherwise, I know that that could happen to me out in the world when something happens to me and suddenly I find myself bawling, you know?
Well, even what I would say is that if you don't release that energy, they're knotted like things in your body, which means that, let's say, an invitation comes in and it freaks you out, you're unable to process it because you still have all these like knots that you're working through,
It's so,
right? So I
it's,
would say it accelerate your journey.
yes. Yes, it gives you space. It gives you
I love
space for more, and then you're ready for more, and it feels really good. It just feels good.
Well, I'm so happy that we did this, and I feel like we got through all the things that I wanted to make sure that we touched on. And I'm just like so grateful to have you in my life, and I'm so grateful that you took the leap to get your voice going, because I want to say this, almost in all of the ascension readings that I'm doing, almost every single person is being called to activate their throat chakra and get that energy moving there, which you have as well. So I remember when we started those voice conversations back and forth, that was a way for you to start using that part of you. And it was uncomfortable. And then you worked through some stuff and then it started getting easier. And now this is just like the next step in that evolution. So my point is that I believe, I would say 80% of us are being called to activate the throat, because it's time to start dropping the breadcrumbs. And only you, each person, can carry that vibration that you came here to carry. So, maybe that's what this will be. Originally, I wanted to call it nectar, because as we were getting to know each other, Richard would be like, "What are you guys talking about?" And I was like, "This is the nectar of her. Like, this is everything." And to me, it feels like I'm understanding her. And that's what I want to know. And maybe this series is about that, like really allowing a platform for people to get over the fear. Because I mean, yeah, it's public and it's like, am I really ready to like put my name out there? It's totally uncomfortable for everyone. I don't know who it wouldn't be. But once you get over that, then it's like, okay, it wasn't that bad. I can do this, in whatever form that takes shape in. I think that it's just the initial thing that feels uncomfortable. And then it's like, okay, I've created things before. I know how to create. Now, how can I do this with my voice and my story? And I think that's where the breadcrumbs start.
Yes.
Like loosening up that energy to let them roll through.
Yes, 100%. And that's why I wanted to do this here with you. And truly, this is dedicated to you, anyone listening. Because if I can do this, 100% you can do this. Trust me. This
Totally.
was a big leap for me, but I'm here doing it for you so that you can know within your own heart that you can do it too, whatever that looks like for you. I
Yeah.
believe in you.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I mean, I would say we both couldn't be more introverted people. Really. So if we can do this, anybody can do it. I believe that 100%. And I'm just so thankful that you felt safe to do it here. And my God, helping me get through the leap of doing it, because I know that there needs to be this, not just interviewing people that have already done it. No, we need the process. We need the energy of understanding how this works and what it can like reflect back to you. And like through Faith's story, it's like I see a fractal of myself in it. So that means it's safe for me to now come out. And to me, that's the journey. And I'm just so grateful for you.
So
Really.
grateful for you, Gabrielle. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
having me. And if you're listening to this, I love you so much.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you.